One of the problems that I see with boxing in terms of advertisement and marketing is that it's becoming a lot like the wrestling community. And what exactly do I mean by that? Well, for one, when you take a look at the amateur wrestling community around the world, and in particular in the United States, it's a very niche sport. If you often notice, a lot of the people that are in the stands, whether that would be in the high school levels or the college levels, are usually just either the parents, which are predominantly the spectators, and then let's say other wrestlers who have wrestled in the past. And that's how niche that particular sport is. And that's kind of where I see boxing becoming to be. Now, why is that problematic, and how does that relate to Showtime canceling PBC's deal in 2024? The reason why that's significant is because of the fact that it is very difficult to attract casual fans in boxing. Unless you are a big name, somebody that talks a lot of trash with the likes of McGregor, with the likes of Raleigh Romero, you're just not going to attract a lot of people when you are not having the guys fight the best, fight the best. That's also another disadvantage in the marketing side of boxing. So it's becoming a very niche sport. Mixed martial arts, in and of itself, is a niche sport. Now, why is it that mixed martial arts is able to attract, let's say, more of a casual fan base on a week-to-week basis as opposed to, let's say, a boxing fan who, let's say, is usually traditional, generational, meaning that you can meet a lot of families somewhere in the southwestern parts of the United States, a predominantly Hispanic population. A lot of them are big boxing fans. Their father is a boxing fan. Their great grandfather was a boxing fan. And they grew up watching the likes of Julio Cesar Chavez, and now in the modern times, the likes of Canelo and maybe even Ryan Garcia. And it was Oscar De La Hoya in the 90s. But nonetheless, this is the type of fan base that you have in boxing. With mixed martial arts, what kind of fan base do you have? The fan base that you have in mixed martial arts consists of a lot of people that, let's just call it what it is, a socialite. And what exactly do I mean by that? Take, for example, the London shows that they do in UFC UK shows, like UFC London or the pay-per-view with Leon Edwards rematching Kamaru Usman. That particular time, it's usually attracting a lot of casual fan base. You often see a lot of British celebrities show up, like who? Anthony Joshua, Eddie Hearn, Gordon Ramsay, and all these other UK stars, sometimes maybe even the likes of Wayne Rooney, whoever is out there that is, let's say, popular or wants to be seen. And that goes for, let's say, even just the average middle class folks in that country that can afford $1,000 tickets just to go and turn up and be shown on live TV on the background. That is basically the reality of mixed martial arts in its marketing in Europe and elsewhere in, let's say, the tourism spots of the UFC's locations, such as Sydney, Australia, Perth, Australia, recent times, and this particular week, Abu Dhabi. So it's important to understand that this is the type of fan base that mixed martial arts has developed over the years. Now, what about boxing? The unfortunate thing with boxing is that you have a situation where it was a little too late for them to go out and put out the best fights. By the end of it, they had Crawford taking on Spence, and then they had Tank taking on Ryan Garcia, which, by the way, in this current time, as you're watching this right now, is one of my highest views within the channel. Yes, the Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis fight. Why? Because it was a time where they finally took these two stars that were undefeated and just decided, you know what? We're going to have you guys fight right now and find out who is the best. And here's the thing, it wasn't even a real undisputed championship fight, but it was a fight between two popular names that we wanted to see for a long time. And here we are. So now it's going to be very difficult for boxing to come back. It's going to be very difficult for boxing to have another network trust them like this again. All right, all right. Testing 1 2 1 2, just making sure we are live right now and in effect. So I'm glad you guys got to watch that particular premiere with me because, for one, I think it's a great segue to what this particular live stream that we're going to talk about. Okay, the reason why I think this is important to talk about is because, for one, it's no secret that I'm a Khabib guy. He's my favorite fighter. I share the same faith with him as anybody else who's a fan of his from around the world. But you also got to understand one thing about that too, right? Is we are an objective mixed martial arts channel. And because of that, I want to give the other side of the story that is not often talked about, which is none other than Volk and El-Kheer. And the reason why I thought this was very important to talk about is because in hindsight, it's really easy to just go out and down a man for trying or chasing greatness. Okay. And once again, he failed because of the fact that he thought he had a shot, considering that he did very good in the first fight. And then he came in here in the most unfavorable circumstances. And by the way, what we saw in UFC 294 is really no different in what we see with a lot of boxing matches all throughout the world when, let's say, they're trying to build up a certain prospect. And what exactly do I mean by that? Well, some of the boxing guys that I know in the UK and maybe here in America, they gave me a little bit of a secret into the world of boxing that maybe other combat sports fans just don't know. And what exactly is that? Well, the secret that the home fighter, meaning the A side fighter of the entire matchup, pays the B side fighter, or in other words, the journeyman, to come in, make the home fighter look good. And not only that, it's kind of exploitive in a way, which has been practiced all throughout boxing in its whole entirety of the existence of the sport. This is something that they've always done. Now, is it ethical? Is it lawful? Maybe not, but I mean, maybe yes, it is lawful, but is it awful? Yes. That's what I'm trying to say, is that just because it's lawful, it doesn't mean that it isn't awful. There's a lot of awful things in offering a man to fight against somebody that has no chance against another man, especially when there are certain circumstances involved. You ever heard the expression, oh, you beat up cab drivers, or in the modern context, you beat up Uber drivers? Well, what exactly does that mean? Well, what that means is that you're fighting guys that are training half time and are not full time fighters for one reason or another. Maybe because they have a second job, maybe because they have other means of making money for themselves, different ways of providing for their family. Nonetheless, fighting is not the 100% thing that they do. And even Logan Paul, in his matchup with Dylan Dennis, vehemently admits and says something to the effect, well, I'm not a boxer. This is just what I do as a hobby. Meanwhile, the bravado that he was coming up with leading into the match and the little verbal tussle rather, that he has going on with Jake Paul, he says something to the effect, well, I'm a better boxer than you. I'm the one that beat Floyd and this and that. But then after the match, that's neither here or there. He says that it's his hobby. We'll take him for his word for it. Just like we take the word of every journeyman that comes in there and says, well, this isn't really what I do 100%. I go out and work in other fields of jobs or other type of work. And then I train whenever I can. And when I get called in to fight, well, that's how I make my money. And guess what? A lot of journeymen out there, especially those that have, let's say, like 100 losses or something to that effect, with, let's say, a winning with wins of, let's say, maybe in the 50s or 40s, maybe even less. Those guys, those journeyman guys, believe it or not, make a whole lot more money than these guys that, let's say, are 7-0 within a span of, let's say, 4 years, right? You've had 7 fights in 4 years or something like that. And guess what? You're not making the same amount of money as the journeyman guys. Now, how is this relevant to Volkanovski? Well, even though he was the champion going into this fight, he was in a compromised situation. He was coming off of surgery, 11 days notice, coming from a 181-pound weight, going down to 155, which isn't, in hindsight, really that bad considering he only went down to 155. But guess what? When you're cutting weight, even 1 pound of cutting weight is hard. Try going into the sauna, trying to cut 1 pound, and you'll see just how hard it is. Just imagine trying to do that 30 more times for the other 28 pounds that you have to lose, which is Volkanovski's case, within an 11-day span. And how did that work out? Well, it's exactly like this. He was drained. He got in there half cocked, for lack of a better word. And then on top of that, he got head kicked because, let's just face it, right? Whenever you get caught like this, there's a lot of factors involved. There's mental factors involved. There's physical factors involved. Could it be that reason that you ate that last piece of cheesecake in training camp when you shouldn't? Could it be because of that you slept a little bit later and you didn't get the proper amount of rest going into that fight? Now you missed that block because of that one mental mistake that you made within that matchup. This is literally what we're talking about with Volkanovski within those minimal seconds that affected the fight, all because he decided to come in here half-assed and got the result that he did. Now, in hindsight, that's really what a lot of the naysayers are saying. But what they're not saying is the fact that this man chased greatness. And why is it important to bring that up? Because guess what? In a fickle society that we live in, we love to break down the people that try something new. I want you to give yourself an opportunity right now to think about this particular scenario. Okay? Imagine you live in a town, and I'm not speaking specifically on anyone or anything like that. This is just a hypothetical situation that goes on around the world in different circumstances of people. Okay, so let's take this for example. You are a factory worker in some random town in, I don't know, Exhibit A Town B, somewhere in the United States or whatever, right? And everybody in that town does the same job, and they've been doing that same job for generations. Let's say one day you just decided, hey, I want to go open a YouTube channel. Well, I want to go do something great. I want to go and cure cancer. I want to go and become an astronaut. And guess what? That entire town of people that don't know what it's like to struggle to chase that type of greatness in terms of becoming an astronaut, in terms of becoming a doctor that cures cancer, they can't fathom that idea, because all they can fathom is the idea that, well, I work and live in this town and these are what is available to me. That is what's realistic. I'm going to go for it. That's the reality of a lot of people. And guess what? To those that are go-getters and to those that are the Black Mamba, Kobe Bryant type A types of the world that are listening to this and thinking to themselves, well, no, that's not me. I'm never going to fall for that. I'm never going to be that guy. Okay, great. But guess what? Here's the other side to this. The other side to this is that you sort of need people in the world to play a different role. Yes, I understand that certain jobs are made for teenagers and perhaps maybe temporarily, which is a great experience for them to have. But eventually, there's going to be people that are going to be in their 20s and into their 30s that are still going to still be doing the same fast food job because of the fact that they don't know anything else. They don't know how to go out and market. They don't know how to get an education. They don't know how to build a particular network that could get them connections to these jobs or different opportunities. Maybe they don't know how to read. Maybe they just don't have the app to read. Maybe they're just lazy. Maybe they just don't have the same motivation as you. Maybe they just don't have the same drive as one person to the other. All these factors are something to really take into account. But the reality is that if you're not one of these people and you want to step out of the line and stand out, you're going to be shamed because they say that it is inherent in us from the days of Allah knows when. You can date back from the beginning of time. We all have this sense of shame from a certain village, right? So we don't want to stand out. We don't want to do certain things that ruffles feathers because we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or offend anyone that is within the territory or the circumference that we live in within our vicinity. Okay, all these are real factors when it comes to quote unquote chasing greatness. So, what is it that we do inherently as human beings? We become skeptical, we become negative. Not only that, we become downers on these people. And this is literally what's happening with Volkanovski. Now that I've gone on that whole entire time about Volkanovski, it's a great way to transition this into none other than Fury and Ngannou. Because you want to talk about chasing greatness. Everybody is talking about how Ngannou is out here chasing greatness. He is a former UFC world heavyweight champion, got stripped because of a contract dispute that they had going on. They weren't able to come to terms. He wasn't able to re-sign. So then here he is, signed to the PFL, but with his first venture outside of the UFC in one of the biggest boxing matches of all time, which is none other than Tyson Fury, taking place this week. So what is significant about this? Yes, it is Ngannou that is chasing greatness because he is the B-side. He is the inexperienced boxer that has never been in this particular fighting rule set ever in his life. Taken on, by the way, the guy that is the best in the world at it. That being Tyson Fury. So yeah, Ngannou has a lot of greatness to chase here. And then you look at his lead up going into this fight. He had contract issues with the UFC. On top of that, he had this situation with Cyril Gane where he went in there with broken knees and was just forced to wrestle because he didn't have the proper power to generate from his legs to his hips and into his arms when he goes and tries to take the head off Cyril Gane. So what did he do? He had to resort to wrestling, which he did for 5 straight rounds. And of course, John Jones was able to beat him within the first round of the takedown and then just choke him easily. But that's neither here or there. Obviously, Francis Ngannou will take for face value. He was very much injured in that fight, so he had to do what he had to do. Remarkable Rocky-like story for him to be able to persevere through that. But not only that, with all these things looming up ahead, the contracts, the fact that this was a do or die situation because it was the last fight on his contract. And it was sort of like a CM Punk situation. If you guys don't remember, CM Punk had the storyline in WWE back in 2011 where he basically did a little pipe bomb segment where he broke the fourth wall and started revealing all these different secrets of the wrestlers in the backstage and their personal lives and how he felt about the entire business and just basically did a shoot. Well, lo and behold, he goes into a fight with John Cena where it is a champion versus champion matchup, very similar to the Cyril Gane and Francis Ngannou fight. Long story short, CM Punk won, unified the undisputed WWE title, and rode off into the sunset as a champion without a WWE contract of a re-signing of any kind. And this is similar to Francis Ngannou's story. So you want to talk about chasing greatness. Now he's chasing greatness in the boxing world in his first boxing match. Not only that, the other aspect of this is Tyson Fury. This is the guy that is literally chasing greatness because of the fact that he wanted to fight Alexander Usyk. The fight would never happen. Okay, so now he has this fight going on with Francis Ngannou. And guess what he does in the midst of it? He goes and signs for a fight to take on Alexander Usyk somewhere down the road, maybe even down in December. As close as that is within a 2 month range, we could see Tyson Fury fight those 2 particular months if he was able to leave here unscathed. And that's a big if, which is the biggest story and the biggest question mark all throughout this entire week. So it's very similar to Volk. He already had a matchup before he took on this 11 days notice matchup with Islam this weekend. He already was signed to a match against Ilya Tapora. Now, what is significant about that fight? Well, for one, it's still going on. And depending on what kind of situation we're looking at with the suspension from a knockout, we could potentially be looking at an interim title with maybe, let's say, Max Holloway or maybe Arnold Allen or some of these top 145ers that are available at that particular time in January. Yet, he was confident, Volk I'm talking about, that he was going to go in here and steamroll Islam, get his double championship, go back down to 145 and fight his original fight that he was originally supposed to have anyway. Now, obviously, that didn't work out the way that it did. Tyson Fury, guess what? Is in that same boat, and we could be looking at that same scenario. Just like that. Why? Because, once again, I want to bring up something that he said in Boxing King Media, which I thought was very telling and very important to try to understand. He said that I'm offended by the fact that people are looking at this matchup with Francis Ngannou like as if I'm fighting some computer nerd, influencer, gamer, YouTuber of some sort. This is not a man who spent his entire life playing video games. This is a trained killer. And I was really glad that Tyson Fury was able to bring that up. And I'm going to tell you why. Because, yes, it's a boxing match, but guess what you're allowed to do in boxing? You're allowed to throw hands. You're allowed to knock your opponent out with your hands. And guess what Francis Ngannou is really good at, among everything else in his MMA skill set, other than his ever-evolving wrestling game against Cyril Gane? What is that? It's none other than his boxing skills, or rather his knockout power with his hands, knocking you out. So that is the X factor of this whole thing. And guess what? Tyson Fury is all right with that because he wants to chase greatness. He wants to take on a killer in Francis Ngannou. And by the way, that is the one thing that he wants to remind you of all this, is that he's fighting a killer because it adds greatness to his resume, whether you agree with it or not. Obviously, all the boxing pugilists and purists that have a high horse about this particular matchup are saying something to the effect, well, he should be able to beat him anyway. This should be easy, or this and that. Guys, I got to be honest with you. I've seen MMA fighters in gyms, including myself, okay, do very good against boxers in a boxing ring because it all depended on the particular style that they had, the particular physical attributes in relationship to what it is that they're able to do with their opponent, as opposed to their previous opponents that weren't able to do jack anything to them. These are all relative to the matters at hand when we're trying to understand this matchup with Fury and Ngannou. Anything can happen. Look, a great comparison with the Islam and Volk Part 2 fight with the Francis Ngannou fight, okay? If Tyson Fury was to win this fight, just like Islam won his fight, we're all going to look at it and say, well, duh, it was supposed to happen that way. We all know that. All the smart ones, or the ones that pretend to be the smart ones in the fight game, are going to be like, yeah, I told you so. I told you so. But what if the opposite happened? What if Volkanovski was able to actually chase that greatness that he was looking for? Okay, then what? Is that something that you would have seen? There are some people that will claim, yeah, I saw that coming. I knew that that was going to happen. The reality is, only those two guys in there are going to know whether there's going to be the biggest upset or whether they're going to do what they usually do and just another night at the office. And that goes for Tyson Fury as well. If he were to win, a lot of people are going to say, yeah, I told you so. But what if he doesn't? Then the people that put all their chips on Francis Ngannou are going to look like the smart ones when in reality, maybe some of them just really didn't know. And that's kind of the theme of this whole entire thing that you got to understand. You don't know. You don't know anything. That's the beauty of this whole entire sport is that you don't know how things are going to go down. And quite frankly, that's kind of the reason why we watch these fights in the first place, isn't it? Because otherwise, why would we even watch at all, right? Why would we even have any particular intrigue at it if we didn't believe that okay, something else would have happened, something different, or this and that? That's that's just combat sports for you in a nutshell, right? Um, I want to play you guys a video that I had from a while back. This is about Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou. I want this was back in Santa Monica. Okay, I want to give you guys a little glimpse of a video that I had made when Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury was signed. So this was back in a Santa Monica hotel that I was in. Let me see where this is at here. Hold on just a second. Here it is. I'm going to play for you guys this when it was officially announced. Where were you when you first heard that Francis Ngannou was going to fight Tyson Fury on October 28th, right in Saudi Arabia, Riyadh? Well, here I am right here in the Santa Monica Pier overlooking the beach, right in my hotel room as I just heard this news. So they really are going to go through with this. Francis Ngannou really is going to have his payday. So what is going to happen as a result of that? Well, I can tell you that if Francis Ngannou gets knocked out by Tyson Fury, this is just going to solidify everything that Dana White was saying and why he didn't want to be part of this entire thing in the first place, or why they didn't want to give him any permission to be able to do this. So the fact that now Francis Ngannou has his payday, that's great for him. But at the same time, this is also sort of a win for the UFC because if Francis Ngannou gets knocked out, guess what's going to happen? All this is going to do is just give the UFC more clout in terms of having the best fighter in the world, which is John Jones right now. Because obviously you can't have John Jones fight Francis Ngannou. So because of that, what do? You go out and you create the narrative. But for Francis Ngannou, this isn't about narratives or anything like that. This was more about fighters' rights, being able to do what it is that he needs to do in order to gain the most amount of money that he can, gain the most amount of clout that he's able to gain from the situation of fighting Tyson Fury. On top of that, they're going to fight in Saudi Arabia. What does that also mean? Look, Saudi Arabia right now is taking over sports. So you could imagine the type of money that they gave him. Look at Ronaldo, look at Messi, look at all the type of money that they give to these different fighters and players and soccer players and all these different types of leagues that they try to get in their country, even F1 racing. Now Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury in a boxing match is now part of that whole deal. So now, what if Francis Ngannou actually wins? That means that he can solidify himself as truly one of the baddest men in the world. Because not only can he knock people out in MMA, he's able to knock out one of the greatest boxers in heavyweight history. Can you imagine the implications of that? Sorry about that. I had the mic muted for a second. What I was saying was that yeah, in the last part of that particular video, I had mentioned that we are either living in an alternative reality or we are living in just a status quo of what we always know boxing to be, which is what the best guy is always going to win. And that seems to be just the common narrative in boxing because of the fact that you always have these A sides going into these situations with the best possible leverage on their side, right? And once again, as I had mentioned in the early portion of this particular live, that every home fighter out there has a financier. It's just this time, the particular financier was none other than the Emirati government and the royal family of that country that really wanted to see all of their guys do good in this particular event. And a lot of people were saying that, yeah, a lot of these matchups were favorable towards them. You've seen the dodgy decision made by the doctor during the Walker and the Ankalaev fight. I suggest you guys check out my post-fight analysis on that particular subject and all things related to UFC 294 in the live portion of this. But I think that it's one of these situations where chasing greatness has a certain effect on both the negative and the positive side of things. So this weekend, what we saw out of Volkanovski was somebody that tried and failed, and then you've seen the backlash that people had, and then the "I told you so's" brigade that came out and basically trashed him for his trying of being great. And then on top of that, failing. So now they want to just pile on him rather than just looking at this and be like, you know what, man, you saved the show. You did something great. But that's just how the world is, right? They're always going to look at everything half empty rather than half full. Just like with Tyson Fury, they're not very happy about Tyson Fury going out there fighting Francis Ngannou, but he sort of made it up by adding, let's say, a later date that could possibly haunt him down the road, but you never know. So that's all I got for this particular live. You guys, please like and subscribe. Check out all my videos. Check out the latest one that I just had put out in the beginning of the live stream. I played the premiere of it. I suggest you guys take a look at that. Showtime Boxing PBC Game Over. Here's why. And on top of that, I will be coming out with another video tomorrow regarding Francis Ngannou and the possible damage that he could take going into this matchup and how that's going to affect his MMA career down the road. Because one of the things that I had mentioned in that video is how dangerous boxing is, and the fact that that brain damage could translate into how you're going to perform in the cage when you go back to your original sport. So you got to ask yourself, is this venture really worth it? Or is it just going to hinder me from a better mixed martial arts career down the road? But those are the consequences that you're going to have to face when you're chasing greatness. Like and subscribe so I can go chase greatness of my own. Inshallah.